preach for a few moments on this topic of joy. In fact, I want to begin a sermon series today on joy.
Amen.
This text, my brothers and sisters, comes at the end of a story, and we'll be going back and preaching through Nehemiah at a later time, because there's so much in here that connects to what we have just been talking about in the last sermon series, as Jesus was teaching all the parables about gentrification. And Nehemiah is the biblical example of how development can happen without gentrification. So there's a sermon series coming later. But Nehemiah had taken on this massive public works project. He was somebody who had a position in another country, far away from his home country. And he heard about the devastation of his homeland. He heard that things were not right there. And he could have resigned himself to simply wring his hands and to shake his head, to say it's a shame what's happening to the people back home. But his feeling of love and solidarity wouldn't let him just do that. And so he was willing to risk his life to go before the king and ask the king for a leave of absence and the resources to go home and to work on his city. My brothers and sisters, there is a lesson even in there about what it means to love something, what it means to love your home, that you cannot just sit by and watch things happen without getting involved in doing something about it. And so Nehemiah gets involved, my brothers and sisters. He goes home with the resources he needs to build the wall, but he realizes that his challenge is not just a resource challenge. But in addition to building the wall, he needs to build the spirits of the people. Because the wall wasn't the only thing that was devastated, my brothers and sisters, but the spirits of the people had been broken as well. And so Nehemiah goes and he begins by assembling the leaders together, and then assembling the people together, and talking with them and helping them to understand what needed to happen, to work with them to create a plan to make it happen, because Nehemiah knew that they were going to have challenges. He knew that there were going to be people who would be opposed to what he was trying to do, my brothers and sisters. And so Nehemiah organizes the people and organizes them to be able to defend themselves against the challenges that they would be experiencing. And they are successful in accomplishing that. They are able to overcome the obstacles. They're able to defeat those who have tried to challenge them. And now the wall has been built. And in the process, my brothers and sisters, what Nehemiah realizes, what the people realized, is that they had not found the book of the law. It had been buried under the rubble, but they did not realize they were missing it until they found it. And so, my brothers and sisters, this people who had their wall broken, who had their spirits broken, were now in a position where now the wall was rebuilt. The spirits of the people were beginning to be rebuilt. And now they have discovered the book of the law. And so here on this day, when they are dedicating the wall, celebrating what they were able to do, Ezra, the priest, stands up to read the book of the law. And when the people hear it, they become disheartened. When they hear it, they become sad because they realize that they have fallen so far away from what God had called them to do. But Nehemiah realizes something, my brothers and sisters. Nehemiah realizes that even though there were still challenges ahead of them, and even though the distance between where they were currently and where they wanted to be was so great, Nehemiah realized they would never make it where they needed to go if the people gave up. And so in realizing that, he realized that he had to tap into something else. That in this moment, my brothers and sisters, that the heaviness of the situation is not what they needed to feel. He realized they needed to experience some joy, even in the midst of the challenge. My brothers and sisters, and this is important for us to remember because in many ways we live in communities that have been devastated, economically devastated, psychologically devastated. We live in devastated communities, my brothers and sisters. And the rebuilding process of the communities is a continual challenge, not just because of the devastation, but because the people who profit from the devastation are still continually trying to devastate and re-devastate communities. Not only that, my brothers and sisters, but those who are profiting off the devastation often come into the communities, and the modern term for this is gaslighting. Gaslighting is when they do something and then they tell you they've done something else. Gaslighting was when they were talking about the FC Cincinnati Stadium going into Oakland, when it was always destined to go into the West End. That's gaslighting. When people were saying they were listening to the voices of the community, while really the decisions were being made behind closed doors. That is gaslighting. When your president says publicly that he believes a Russian dictator over his own intelligence agency, and then gets back on TV the next day and says he never said what he said that day, that's gaslighting. My brothers and sisters, the people who profit off of the destruction and the misery of our communities often come in and they gaslight us. They try to tell us one thing, they try to say one thing, while really they are doing something else, my brothers and sisters. And so this is part of the challenge, my brothers and sisters, but the challenge can seem so overwhelming at times. When I woke up yesterday and I was going throughout my day and I got the alert on my phone about the shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh, my brothers and sisters, it felt like just one too many things. It just felt so heavy in the moment. And I was tempted, Reverend Larkin, just to call you and say, I need a family sermon part 2, because I don't know if I got a sermon to preach on a day like today. God had already put this sermon of joy in my spirit. I had been working on this sermon of joy, but I said, how do we preach joy on a day like today? And God led me to this scripture, this place in Nehemiah, where in the midst of the people's weeping and crying, Nehemiah comes to them and says, do not weep or cry, but rejoice, because the joy of the Lord is your strength. Well, what is it about joy, Nehemiah, that you think we can find joy even in the midst of sadness, of weeping, even in the midst of chaos and catastrophe, even when we realize the distance between where we are and where we want to be is so great? How can we find joy? Nehemiah, my brothers and sisters, he talks about joy in 3 ways that might be helpful. First thing I want to say is that what Nehemiah shares is that joy is not an individual experience, but joy is a collective experience. What I'm saying by that, my brothers and sisters, is that Nehemiah does not call individuals to joy, but he calls the community to joy. In certain towns, particularly in very rural areas, it's very popular in certain countries in South America and in Africa where people live in a village. They do not have running water that comes to people's homes. And so the drinking water for the village, the water that is needed to feed the livestock and other animals that people have, is not, you cannot go to your sink or your faucet or to your refrigerator to get the drinking water. You have to go to a community well. There is a well that is in the center of the community, and everybody goes to the well to get the water that they need to drink. The well is there because every time it rains, the rain is able to fill up the well water. And so that water then is there for the entire community to be able to access, to be able to drink from, my brothers and sisters. That is the way joy ought to operate in our lives. Joy ought to be a community resource, my brothers and sisters, because I'm here to tell you, if you don't already know, that just getting through the day, there can be many challenges that can drain your joy. And if you had to be dependent on your own individual reserves for joy, my brothers and sisters, some of us might run out of joy before we run out of day. Most of us would run out of joy before we ran out of week. And almost all of us would run out of joy before we run out of month, my brothers and sisters. And that's why God does not force us to be dependent upon our individual reserves of joy, but God provides joy as a communal resource, my brothers and sisters, so that if you run out of joy, all you have to do is come to the community well and drink from the water that never runs dry. All you have to do, my brothers and sisters, is make your way here to 710 North Fred Shuttlesworth Circle on a Sunday morning. And if you don't have enough joy, then you might hear somebody like a Lenny Hunt singing about the goodness of God, my brothers and sisters. And he might let you know that God gives us the strength to run on a little bit further. You might just hear the prayer of a Reverend Belinda Larkin praying when you can't pray for yourself. You might just be able to find communal joy, my brothers and sisters, because God does not force us to find our own joy, but God provides us the benefit of community so that when we come together, just maybe you might get a hug from somebody that lets you tap into a communal source of joy. It's why, my brothers and sisters, as sore as I was, as much pain as my back was, I could not stay home on today because I believe the scripture that the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I knew if I was going to get the strength I need to carry on this week, that I needed to come over here, even if I had to crawl to the church house, so I could experience the joy of the Lord. Joy is a communal experience, my brothers and sisters. What Nehemiah says in this, my brothers and sisters, is that joy is not a feeling, but joy is a conscious decision. Let me explain the difference, my brothers and sisters. Feelings are how we emotionally react to situations. And oftentimes, feelings are beyond our control. Feelings are what we do subconsciously. It is an emotional reaction that we do not always have control over, my brothers and sisters. Sometimes we just feel a certain way. There was a cartoon I remember when I was growing up. It was a cartoon version of Robin Hood that Disney made. It had, it was with cartoon animals. There was lions, and I think Robin Hood was a fox. And every time I saw this cartoon, I felt sad. Now, the cartoon had a happy ending, and everything was great, and people were wondering why I was sad in the midst of a happy ending, and I didn't have any explanation for it. It wasn't rational. It was just what was happening with me emotionally. I felt sad, and that's the way feelings are, my brothers and sisters, that sometimes feelings do not correspond to what is happening around us.
Okay.
We just feel a particular way about it. If you've ever had somebody try to scare you, and you felt the emotional reaction to the scaring, even when you knew what you thought might have been happening in the moment past, your body does not always automatically regulate itself. You still feel a certain way. You still feel the panic inside of you, even when you know there's no reason to panic anymore. It's because emotions do not always correspond to our control, my brothers and sisters. And so, if we are waiting for ourselves to feel joyful, to find joy, my brothers and sisters, sometimes we may wait a long time. Joy is not something we can always feel, my brothers and sisters, but joy is something we can always choose. If you don't believe me, my brothers and sisters, ask the people who protested during the civil rights movement, those who were arrested in Alabama, those who were thrown in jail, not knowing when they would get out, not knowing if they would get out, not knowing if the police would beat them or if they would die in those jail cells, my brothers and sisters. But the word is that down there in the jail cells, in the darkness, behind the bars, my brothers and sisters, that they did not give in to fear, but somebody said they heard singing coming from the jail cells, that somebody started singing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine from a jail cell, I'm going to let it shine." And they began to sing, my brothers and sisters, and the police officers came down there and told them to stop with all of that singing. And the more they tried to silence them, the louder they sang, my brothers and sisters, as a testimony that you can take my freedom, but you can't take my joy. In fact, my brothers and sisters, I believe somebody said in their spirit, if they never said it out loud, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away, my brothers and sisters. What I'm trying to tell you is that joy is a choice. You can choose joy, my brothers and sisters. Every time you feel down, every time you feel way down, you don't have to choose to let the way down have the last word, my brothers and sisters. But if you just remember what the praise team sang just a few minutes ago, that if the Lord never does anything else for me, He's done enough. If you just start to count the things that God has done for you, my brothers and sisters, I believe you can choose joy. My brothers and sisters, I just want to know, is there somebody here that can say, even though it may be dark times, even though I may have challenges, when I take a moment to think about what God has done for me, God has been faithful to me, and so today, despite the downs, despite the difficulty, despite the challenges, I can choose to have joy. Joy, my brothers and sisters, is a choice. Do me a favor, won't you turn to your neighbor and say, "Neighbor, you can choose to have joy." Joy is a choice, my brothers and sisters. Nehemiah called the people together and he said, I want you to collectively choose joy. But joy, my brothers and sisters, was not just about how they talked or how they enjoyed one another's company, but joy had a responsibility to it.
Okay.
It's right there in the text. He said, I want you to rejoice, to have joy, to eat the fat food, to eat the fried chicken. Eat some macaroni and cheese. Eat some collard greens. Eat the good food, my brother. Eat the food that lets you know that somebody lovingly took time to make it. Eat the fat food in the good drink. Now I'm going to let you interpret what the good drink is. But Nehemiah said, drink the good drink. He said, but don't just be satisfied eating the fat food in the good drink yourself, but send some of that good food to somebody who wasn't able to prepare food for themselves.
Mercy.
Because joy is a communal resource. That also means that joy has a communal responsibility. My brothers and sisters, that means if you are trying to be selfish with your joy, then you're going about this all wrong. If you just trying to keep joy to yourself, then you're not experiencing God's joy, my brothers and sisters. But what Nehemiah said to the people was enjoy the day, celebrate the day, and make sure that the people who don't have provisions can rejoice too, because they can enjoy what you have prepared. Joy requires that we take care of one another, my brothers and sisters. So many times the way that American ideology frames joy, the way that American capitalism frames joy, the way that American white supremacist theology frames joy, my brothers and sisters, is that joy is about what happens between you and God. It's about what happens between you and your pocketbook. It's what happens between you and maybe your family, my brothers and sisters. But that is about it. But when God gives us joy, my brothers and sisters, God does not give it to us for us to hold on to ourselves, my brothers and sisters, but God gives it so that we can share it with somebody else. My brothers and sisters, if we are not in the sharing business, then we are not doing God's business, because God's call is not for us to be individually saved, for us to be individually transformed, for us to be individually joyful, but it's for the community to experience joy, and for the community to experience joy, sometimes they gotta know that somebody loves them. That somebody who doesn't know their name, somebody who has no reason to care about them, somebody who is not part of the biological family, somebody who might not even be a part of the extended family, somebody who might not even be a part of the blended family, still sees himself as church family, even if they don't walk in the doors of the church, because we understand that church is not defined by these four walls, but church is who we are everywhere we go. So everyone I encounter is a part of my church family, because God placed them in my path for a reason. So I'm not just hoarding joy for myself, but I'm trying to share the joy with somebody else. My brothers and sisters, in fact, I believe that joy is like that last bit of bread and last bit of oil that the widow had when the prophet came to her house. The widow had this last bit of flour and oil, and God told the widow that the prophet was coming, but she thought thought the prophet was coming when her cupboard was full. But the prophet came when there was only a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil left. And the prophet said, go ahead and make up a little bit of cornbread. Make some up for me and for your family. And she said, I don't have enough to be able to make it for everybody. And the prophet said, if you just make it, I promise it will be enough. And the Bible said that every day she went back to the cupboard, there was enough to be able to make enough cornbread for that day, my brothers and sisters. What I'm trying to say is if you share the joy that God has given you with someone else, I promise you every time you come back to the community, there'll be some more joy just waiting on you, my brothers and sisters. There'll be some more waiting on you. Don't have to keep it for yourself, but give it away, and God has more joy. Joy is a conscious decision. We choose joy. My brothers and sisters, joy is connected to our collective care for one another, my brothers and sisters. The last thing that Nehemiah shows us in this text, my brothers and sisters, is that joy comes with clarity. Joy comes with clarity. Notice the series of events that happened. This text that had been lost, the word of God that God had given to the people to help them understand how they were to live, had been lost. Ezra finds the word, and Ezra reads the word. When the people hear the word, they begin to weep. But when they get clarity on the word, the text says they go home and they rejoice. Maybe you missed it, so let me say it again. Ezra finds the word, he reads the word, the people hear the word, and they begin to weep. But once they get clarity on the word, then they go home rejoicing, my brothers and sisters. So many times, the word of God has felt oppressive to us. It has felt weighty to us. It has felt like it has shackled or imprisoned us. And that's because we were taught to hear the word of God. But we haven't been given much clarity on the word of God. And sometimes, my brothers and sisters, it's not always for nefarious reasons. Sometimes the people who have taught us the word of God were just hearers themselves. In fact, I remember hearing somebody read the scripture and said, may the Lord add a blessing to the hearers and the doers of the word. But somewhere between the hearing and the doing, somebody forgot that we need some clarity. Because sometimes when we hear, we don't always understand what we hear the first time. Now, I've never really been a teacher, but we've got some teachers in the room. And so my guess is if we ask the teachers in the room, they might say that they've given lectures to their class before. And that every time they give a lecture to the class doesn't always understand the lecture the first time. It's why you have to give them some additional reading. It's why you have to give them some additional homework. There are other things that have to happen to make sure that the people understand what they hear. And in fact, my brothers and sisters, that is the reason that we give exams. The exams are not just to give you a grade, but it's to evaluate whether or not you have understood what you have heard. My brothers and sisters, what has happened for too long in too many churches is that we have tried to go from hearing to doing with no clarity. And, my brothers and sisters, it is why people have felt that the Bible, that the Word of God is an oppressive book, my brothers and sisters. It is why when people hear it, they often feel like weeping because we don't have clarity on what's being said. And so we use the Bible to create the vision. When the Bible was not meant to create the vision, but it was meant to bring us together. We use the Bible to judge one another when the Bible was not meant to be a judgmental book, my brothers and sisters, but it was meant to be a book to move us past judgment. We use the Bible, my brothers and sisters, as a reason to exclude people from the kingdom of God when Jesus was not about the exclusion business, but Jesus was about the inclusion business, my brothers and sisters. We have stopped with hearing the word, and so we go home weeping, my brothers and sisters. The community has stopped with hearing the word, which is why people don't want to come to church anymore, my brothers and sisters, because all we do is hear the word. But we've got to have some clarity in this, my brothers and sisters. We need some understanding, which is why you ought to be careful about who you let teach you about what the Bible says, because you need to make sure they've got some clarity. Otherwise, they're going to try to teach you based on what they heard. But my brothers and sisters, when we have clarity about what the Word of God says, we understand that the Word of God is a liberating word. It is a freeing word. That when the Bible says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, my brothers and sisters, that is God's intention for us, is for us to be liberated, not to be oppressed. So we just got to keep digging until we find some clarity. My brothers and sisters, when we hear the word can bind us, but when we have clarity on the word can set us free. It's the same word, mind you. The word doesn't change. It's just our understanding of the word change, my brothers and sisters. And so I believe when the people had clarity about the word, my brothers and sisters, they remembered that God was with the children of Israel when they were bound in Egypt. But God did not leave them bound in Egypt, but God delivered them, my brothers and sisters. But God didn't even stop with delivering them, but God brought them into a promised land, a land that was going to be their land, my brothers and sisters. I believe when they read it, they knew that God gave them a king named David. But God didn't just give them a king, but God held that king accountable. So when that king started acting like the kingdom belonged to him, when the king started acting like he wasn't accountable to anybody, when the king started tweeting recklessly, my brothers and sisters, God sent a prophet to the king to remind the king that your rule does not reign forever. Only God's rule reigns forever. They remembered, my brothers and sisters, that they were once in exile in Babylon. And even though they had been in exile, God did not leave them in exile, but God brought people back slowly at first. And then altogether, God brought the people back into the land, my brothers and sisters. And that's where their history ended, my brothers and sisters. That's all the clarity they can have. But if we keep on reading, we can find some more clarity in this book, my brothers and sisters, because our clarity doesn't stop there. But if you keep flipping in the Bible, my brothers and sisters, you'll read the words of a prophet Jeremiah, my brothers and sisters. He said, when I felt like I couldn't talk talk anymore, when I felt like giving up, when I saw the world around me and it felt too heavy for me, I said, I'm not going to preach anymore. I'm not going to sing anymore. I'm not going to talk about God anymore. But it was like fire shut up in my bones. There was joy that I had that I couldn't even take account for, and it wouldn't let me alone. I had to keep on talking about it, my brothers and sisters. If you flip a little further, you'll read the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who found themselves faced with a death sentence, my brothers and sisters. But even in the death sentence, they found some joy, my brothers and sisters. And in their joy, they realized that even though the fire burned up the people that put them in the furnace, that the fire couldn't burn them up, because God had given them an air condition even in the fiery furnace, my brothers and sisters. If you keep on reading a little while longer, my brothers and sisters, you will find that through 42 generations, God did not leave us to find joy on ourselves, but God came, my brothers and sisters. He was born into the world. And what is it that we sing at the time? We celebrate, we sing joy to the world. The Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare its room in heaven and nature sing, my brothers and sisters. We have joy that God has given us in the person of Jesus Christ, my brothers and sisters. Joy, my brothers and sisters. And even though they tried to crucify Jesus, even though they buried him in a tomb early Sunday morning, Jesus got up with all power in his hands, my brothers and sisters. Power to give us the joy that we need to keep on running. So don't give up, my brothers and sisters. Don't get weary in well-doing, because God has some more joy for us. Oh, I hear the songwriter say, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. My brothers and sisters, we've been weeping for long enough. It's time for us to choose to have some joy. We have a practice, my brothers and sisters, that we call response to the word.
I know what I'm doing.
It's our way of acknowledging that God
Every single time.
to
I know.
because I'm the one in front of you with a microphone that God desires to speak to through each and every one of us.